Hi, and welcome to Livingtree Live. My name is Gary Hensley, and I am the CEO of Livingtree. This live session is part in an effort by Livingtree and just as a company to bring some of what we thought were the most interesting conversations, which were usually the conversations that happened before and after our webinars. We had a series of those, and we had built a tremendous audience and family. And what we noticed is some of the most interesting conversations that we had happened kind of before and after the webinar. So we wanted to change up the format a little bit, bring this to a broader audience, to different parts of our family that live on social media. And so that is what we're doing here with Livingtree Live. We still don't have a official name for this, but we'll figure that out. So if you have any ideas for us, feel free to let us know. But we are super honored today to have Kyle, who is the executive director of the New York State PTA. Hey, Kyle, how are you?
Good. I'm thrilled to be here with you today, Gary. I'm a big fan of yours, your colleagues, and certainly Livingtree. So it's excited to have this conversation.
Awesome. Well, I've gotten a chance to know you over the last 2.5 years, and kind of being in partnership with you. And then it seems like right when we had launched our partnership, the world
The
just
world
turned upside
changed. Yeah.
down. Right. And we had to work through that together. And how do we do things virtually? And how do we help your member organizations kind of go from, where they were in terms of, some of their fundraising efforts and transition online and to no school at all at some point, which is, it was an interesting time to partner. And I have to say, you've been just phenomenal through it all. And the members of your organization have been incredibly supportive through that. So I appreciate that. But as I've gotten to know you, there's some really interesting parts of your story that I would love for people to kind of just get to know you beyond just the
Sure.
executive director of the PTA. So if you don't mind sharing, tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you kind of end
Yeah,
up
great
here, and where
question.
did you start?
I, I think, realistically, I was raised by, a wonderful family where service was always the number one priority. My father, a Vietnam Green Beret, who after Vietnam ended up being our local police chief until his early and untimely passing from Agent Orange exposure. My mother, same thing, always our school board and Our Ladies Auxiliary, and my father also in our local fire department. So I was raised, I think, that you had to try to find unique ways to give back to your community. And I think that's really important. And I think that's really what PTA does. We try to help raise civic minded students. We as volunteers ourselves try to figure out how we can give back to our community. So I was actually supposed to go to the Air Force Academy, and my father took ill with cancer, and I decided to stay home. And fast forward through a number of, I'll say, college choices with different kind of career paths, I end up being a lawyer instead
All
of an Air
right.
Force pilot. Yeah. So I was going to go into that military too, and an injury actually kind of sidelined me from that. I was then going to be a police officer, and an injury sidelined me from that. So I ended up going to law school. They always say whatever's meant to be is meant to be. So maybe I was meant to be a PTA advocate. So here I am. And I had always been, starting at the age of 18, a volunteer fireman myself. So I had the honor of serving my then fire department, Manian's Fire Department, and then moving over to a fire department in North Greenbush, and was very honored to serve as a firefighter at Ground Zero when 9/11 happened. So I think, throughout my history, I've always had that sense of giving back. And I think that's really important, something that we should all instill as parents and families into our children. We see now in the volunteer community less and less numbers of volunteers and less numbers of really those, as example, in the volunteer fire service. I was also a volunteer EMT for a long time too, rode an ambulance. So less and less those types of first responder volunteers and PTA volunteers and volunteers in Little League. And I just are after a 2.5 year stint, I am the exiting Little League president for my Little League as well. So I know I wear a
That's,
lot of
you're a
hats,
busy
Gary. I guess I
lady.
wear a lot of hats. I've been an Elk. I was an officer in the Elks and president of the Junior League, which is a service organization for women. So I think you see a theme here. I think it's always important that we instill in our children the sense that, how can you give back? How can you help your community? Whether it's through the volunteer fire service or volunteer ambulance service, which I did for many, many years. Nothing like it, nothing better than running into a burning building, I'll tell you that. And having that sense of help. I know it sounds crazy. Really, it's nothing like it. But having that sense of service and that kind of selfless commitment to helping others is really important. Whether you volunteer at your local Little League or your local school, you should absolutely join your PTA or your other parent teacher organization if you're not affiliated with PTA, and find ways in your own life that you can give back. We through COVID in our community, it's an interesting mixed community. I live in a rural area in Rensselaer County, but we're only about 20 minutes outside of Albany, which is our capital. We have a lot of need there. So when COVID hit, our Little League and community kind of got together and said, well, what we're going to do. So we ran food drives and we ran drives for our seniors, and we collected a lot of food for our community. But, I think you have to, as a good global citizen here, especially in New York, but all over the country, when there's a need, I think if you have time, resources, you have to ask how you can fill that need. And I think that's really what PTA is about. And I know Livingtree is really supporting our mission, so we appreciate that. But yeah, give back. I think that's the theme of kind of my life. How can you give
Yeah.
back? How can you help a child, help a neighbor, help a senior, help a veteran? We've done pretty much all of that in my community. I'm very, very proud of that work.
Kyle, that is like incredible. I mean, there's so much to be proud of, and I just want to pick up on that theme a little bit because I do want to hear more of this story. So you through a series of events. It sounds like what maybe at the time seemed like disappointments because I'm sure the injuries were no fun. You end up becoming a lawyer.
Yeah,
Um,
I know. I was actually so I was supposed to go to the Air Force Academy, be a pilot. I was then a part of a group called Civil Air Patrol, which is still available, which is a fantastic organization. If you are interested in helping and volunteering in search and rescue or in military aviation, it's called CAP, Civil Air Patrol. So I kind of always wanted to go into the military. Coming from a military family, I think Irish family, half of the people in my family are farmers, half of them are police or in the military. I think that's how it's split. So I was going to go one way or the other. I went the military route.
it's destined.
And like I said, I decided to stay home, help, with my mother, take care of my father in his last years. So he passed when I was 19. Really kind of changed the way I looked at life. Realized life isn't always fair. It is what you make of it. And kind of recommitted my service, probably in his name, as I tear up a little bit, to doing good for somebody. So I actually went to college for aeronautical engineer. So I have something up here. So I was an aeronautical engineer student, and then an ankle injury really made it difficult for me to finish ROTC, which was unfortunate. I was an Air Force ROTC at the time. So I switched majors, ended up getting a master's in criminal justice administration because, again, my father was a cop. I figured if I can't be in the military, then I will be a police officer. And nothing exciting. I was marching in the St. Patrick's Day parade with my fire department, and I slipped in a pile of horse manure. I kid you not. And I broke my right arm right before State Trooper Academy. So I was going to be a state trooper and literally slipped in horse poop. And I know nothing exciting about that. And it's my trigger hand. So I couldn't go into State Police Academy because I was going to be a state trooper. And I kind of had to reflect on my life. They gave me a deferment. They said, you can come in a year after your arm heals. I said, okay, great. But then I kind of reflected and said, if this is not my path, there was a lot of big signs that saying this was not my path. But if it was not my path, then what was my path? And that's when I went to law school. So I knew I wanted to go into some type of service law. I, interned at the DA's office as example, wanting to give back there. And I
Mm.
interned at the Government Law Center. I interned at a few non-for-profits and realized that I interned at the Senate and the Assembly. And so I got the political bug a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I ended up after law school. I actually represented the Catholic Church for 7 years, which was really interesting. So
Oh, I'm sure.
I work for the New York State Catholic Conference, fantastic organization that supports the bishops and Catholics and the churches here in New York State. And then I was doing some Catholic schoolwork and some other great, fantastic work, Catholic charities, and really actually supporting victims of sex abuse. And that was really
Mm.
meaningful to me because the church has really fantastic programs in place and did that intend to really support, victims of child sex abuse. So that was really meaningful work. And I realized I wanted to continue to do meaningful work. I tinkered with going to a law firm for just a minute and
Yeah.
decided that was not my path. So, and then I kind of got into public education. So I had the honor after those first 7 years of my legal career, I had the honor of representing our great school superintendents. Dedicated, amazing people. Now, New York State is interesting in that we have more than 700 independent school districts. So, unlike other states where you may have a countywide system or a large system, our school districts are local, very local. They're by town, by municipality. So you really got to see the real diverse and excitement and difference and of all of our superintendents and all the different school districts.
Wow.
So I had the pleasure of representing them for a number of years, and they are fantastic leaders. I'll never forget what one superintendent said to me. The first thing on my mind in the morning is, are my kids safe? The last thing on my mind in the afternoon is to get everybody home safe. So I kind of realized education might be my home. So after working for them for a number of years, fantastic, I had the honor of representing our state's fantastic teachers at our teachers union, our New York State United Teachers. There is nobody more dedicated to our children than our teachers, our educators, our principals, our superintendents, our school-related professionals. Just amazing. So it was my honor to represent our great teachers, and I worked on a lot of big issues, testing and assessment and receivership, as we call it, for struggling schools, and real big issues and curriculum. And then, our past president, Bonnie Russell, had called me. I'd known her a number of years in the education community, and there was a transition here, and there happened to be an executive director opening, and I kind of took the leap, and it's been 5.5 years, best 5.5 years of my life.
Wow. Wow. Kyle, I mean, that is
That's my
absolutely.
professional path from falling in horse poop to executive director of the PTA.
Who knew, right? Who
Who
knew?
knew?
I'm sure at that moment you did not see the path, but
Did
as
not
you
see
look
my path.
backward,
I kind of questioned, what I am, a reasonably religious person. So I kind of looked up and said, "What are you doing to me? Like,
yeah.
what is happening here?" But everything works out for a reason.
I truly believe that. We have some things in common. My father was also a Green Beret. I don't know if you
Oh, I
knew that.
didn't know that.
Yes, and he
Wow.
is now a chaplain. Well, retired, but he ended up becoming a chaplain in the army.
Okay,
Um,
so
and-
I'm going to interrupt you. That's hysterical because my father went to seminary.
no
So
way.
he was actually going to be a priest before he went in the military. Every Irish family has a priest. We're Irish, and my maiden name is Macaulay, even though I use Belokopitsky. And he studied to be a priest and decided he wanted a child, so he left the priesthood and joined the military and met my mother after when he got out. Yeah. So, anyways, keep going.
That's awesome. My
It's so
parents
funny.
also met in the military. My mom was in the Women's Service Corps at the time, and so she was serving. And then I think it's something about growing up with moms and dads that serve, both military and through being a chaplain. I wanted I wanted to serve too. I wanted to give back. So I also was on track to receive an Air Force ROTC scholarship.
I didn't even know this. This is hysterical.
Yes, I know. As I was listening to you, I was like, wow, there's a lot more in common than I even knew
Yeah.
about. Um, and I am colorblind.
My
So, and
son's colorblind. My father is colorblind too. Actually, he wanted to be a pilot, but he couldn't be a pilot because of his colorblindness. So
yes,
yeah,
and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted
yeah,
to be a pilot, and I was like, well, maybe I could go through the medical, side and be a surgeon. And but I had childhood asthma, so that also disqualified me.
yeah.
And I said, how can I serve? And so I went to school to be a teacher. I was a North Carolina teaching fellow, and so similarly, I
Mm,
feel like that
not funny.
that something about parents that
Your
serve.
grandfather must be colorblind too, then, if you're colorblind. So it runs
I have no idea. He might be.
in the women's side of family. They're male children. So yeah,
It must be then.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I went through, kind of a similar path in terms of service, and it's crazy how when you have, and it inspires me actually as a dad. I have 3 kids, and I think about my parents and everything they did, and the example they set, and the sacrifices they made, and I think about that now as a dad. How do I make sure my kids say that about me when they're on a show somewhere and talk about their upbringing and
I know,
what's
right?
that
Always
going
want I'd laugh when you say that because you always worry about your children. One, you always want them to be more successful than you, right? Because
to.
that's what we
Yes.
want as parents. We want our children to feel loved and be successful. And then the same thing, it's like, oh, are they going to talk about the therapy they're going to need when they get older, or are they going to talk about me fondly? I'm not so sure
Yes.
on that. So
I hope so. Only time will tell.
I know, I know, I know. But we do the same thing. So we instill in our son the same kind of sense of giving. So he's volunteered all over the place. A couple years ago, at the beginning of COVID, we actually he was seeing brothers and sisters that were homeless a lot. So
Hmm.
he started a project where he was packing the gallon size homeless bags, as you'd call them, with scarves and socks and cereal bars and deodorant and things like that. So we would keep them in cars and give them out to friends. So if they saw people that were in need, they would hand them out. So um, I think that's important to instill even at an early age. I mean, he was 8 and 9 doing this work. And continues the volunteerism now today in different. He's lucky. I volunteer for a lot of places, so he gets to do that pretty easy. And I
Yeah.
think that's really fantastic if we can instill that in our children too.
Yes. Amazing. And you have been, I'm sure, a great example to your kids, to your son, in
It
all
does
the
drive them
work.
crazy a little bit. So it
Does it?
does. I have to say. Oh, it does. It does a little bit. So my husband, we have our garage has been transformed into a food bank for about 5 months during COVID. And I kid you not, like garage was not usable, just food everywhere. It's been
Yes.
transformed into a library because we did big book donations. It's been transformed for both holiday baskets for so we had a number of local agencies who had reached out to me, St. Joseph Center as example in Vanderheiden, homeless shelters, or one of our schools, our housing schools for youth, and they needed as example Christmas and Hanukkah baskets, and they needed gifts, and they needed Easter type of baskets for children. So my garage literally is not my garage. Whatever the organization that reaches out to help ends up getting the use of my garage somehow. So my husband always jokes. Now I'm no longer Little League president. I'm still on our board of directors, but my presidency was over on November 1st after a very long 2.5 years. And
Yes.
he said, okay, so what's the new thing? Like, what are we doing now? So now we're actually going to work to start a league for disabled children for baseball. So we're really excited about that.
Oh,
So
that's
that's the next
amazing.
project. Yeah. So that's really exciting. So we're going to work on that and then continue, of course, to work and support our local child based and senior based and everything based agencies in Rensselaer County. So yeah, it's exciting.
Kyle, they're lucky to have you. I don't know how you do it. You must have a million pounds of energy behind
It's
you
my
just
type
to.
A personality. If I'm not busy, I'm bored. Like really, I need to be doing something all of the time, whether it's work or volunteering or um, you know doing all of those wonderful things we do as parents.
Yeah, it is, and it's a good example to your kids, and not just to your kids. I mean, just the to serve. And as I listened to your story, I was just inspired. I mean, the things that you've done and experienced, I think give you a unique perspective on on the world, and in particular, PTA. So I want to talk just a little bit about the PTA side of things, if you don't
Great.
mind.
I could
Um,
talk PTA all day. I love it.
I figured that might be a topic you know a little bit about. And the PTA is such an interesting organization. It's been around 120 plus years.
125 this year. And do you know PTA
25.
started in New York?
It did.
In Yes, in Syracuse 125 years ago, and we're having our annual convention in a week in Syracuse for 125 years.
That's amazing.
I
And
know. We
just
were the first. So exciting.
it's so cool that there's an organization dedicated to parents. And you and I were talking a little bit beforehand. There's just so much conversation going around, parents and parents' voice in all kinds of things, from politics to school to, really. I always say there was never a silver lining to COVID because it's just horrible. But there seemed to be an awakening of parents in terms of really starting to engage in their kids' lives, and maybe in ways they were kind of maybe a little bit on autopilot for a little while. It's kind of like, hey, I'm getting a view into what's happening in my kids' education. I want to be more involved. I need to be more involved. And so it's great to have an organization like the PTA that can be a voice for that, can be a channel for that. Um, what have you seen over the last 2 years in terms of that change in your membership? Kind of the things they're talking about, the things they're struggling with, the
Yeah.
things they want.
Yeah,
I,
great question. I think at first as an education community, COVID brought a number of equity issues that we always knew were there to the forefront,
mm,
right? So, digital equity, and some kids have no access to broadband. Some kids have no devices. Some kids have no internet access. And when we had to go remote instruction, we quickly realized that 200,000 New York State students had no access. So we had to figure out as an education community how we fix that. We also realized equity issues on poverty, right? Hunger, food insecurity,
mm,
underemployment, unemployment, huge issues in all over the state, whether it's an urban setting or a rural setting or suburban setting. In New York State, about 53% of our students qualify for free or reduced price lunch, what we call FERPL. That means that they are in some level of federal poverty and state poverty. And it's our job as good citizens to help support those families and get those children certainly at least meals, warm meals in school buildings. So, we saw that number grow. We saw,
mhm,
distance and equity between different cohorts of students. What do I mean by that? When we look at our assessments and our some of our measures of student success, we saw again big discrepancies between our Black students and our non-Black students, between our English language learning students, our ELs, and our primarily English speaking students, between our students with disabilities. COVID
mm,
was so hard on so many of our students with disabilities, and learning in a really unique and different way, something that our schools were not ready for. Right, we were not ready for
mm,
remote instruction. Overnight, we had to figure out how to educate 2.6 million school children in an online community. It was unheard of, and I'll be honest, it went very poorly those first few months. Schools
yeah.
and students were getting very little meaningful instruction, but it was through no fault of the district. It was just trying to do something huge, totally new, trying to
Hmm.
figure out technology. Now, this last school year, the 2021 school year, and can you believe it's been going on that long, went much,
Mm,
much better for most of our students. But we still had those equity issues pop up. And I think that as an education community is what we're trying to solve now. Trying to
yeah.
figure out, we always knew there was inherent equity issues. And now COVID and the way we had to transform instruction really brought those equity issues to the forefront. So that is a silver lining, right? A silver
Yep.
lining. Another silver lining is real family engagement. So, the old way was the Backpack Express, or parents and families coming to a school building, or you had to have a one-on-one opportunity with your teacher. And COVID changed everything, right? So we as an association had to transform how we were going to connect with our members because we couldn't do it in person. We had to figure out how our members could connect with their schools because they couldn't do it in person. So that was a great opportunity. Over the course of a year, as example, we had 75 webinars for parents
Mm.
and workshops trying to figure out, here's how you do things virtually. Here's how you can connect. We had, monthly webinars on mental health and social emotional learning. And because we saw, unfortunately, during COVID, the mental health crisis for students, you just grew exponentially. It's really alarming, and one of the priorities we're working on now. Again, we had to figure out how to connect with our members and how to get them the support that they need. For example, we've always been very school based. Well, we couldn't
Hmm.
be in schools anymore. So how can we still support community? New York State PTA, as example, started a new meals program. So we offered any single New Yorker to reach out to us, and we would personally connect them with a food source for their family.
Oh,
We
wow.
helped families fill out WIC and SNAP applications. We work with Fidelis Care, a fantastic wellness partner, and actually enrolling people in health insurance when they lost their jobs. And
Mm.
that program continues. So these programs continue. So we had, as an association, to transform I'll say, our old model, which was working well, into something
Hmm.
that was new and innovative. And we're really excited that actually National PTA actually gave us the National PTA Advocacy Award for our work during COVID, because we
Wow.
went from I'll say, a wonderful advocacy and education based association to a direct service model, which is something we really never did before. So that was really exciting. And our unit leaders and our PTA members and parents and families and educators in our school buildings during COVID were heroes, each and every single one of them. And I think none of us can forget that. They did remarkable things for students every day. We had, teachers and school-related professionals, educators volunteering to pack lunches and deliver them on buses for students. We had educators coming in on their off hours and weekends to, again, sign children up for health insurance, to staff different types of community model services for intervention. We had parents and families and PTAs reaching out to their own members, to their own parents, and saying, what do you need? How can we help you as a family? It wasn't just about fundraising, right? It wasn't just about the PTA meeting or the fun run or the pumpkin painting contest. It was
Hmm.
really about basic services that parents and family need. And that's what PTA leaders across New York State, really across this country, did for a year and a half. They supported each and every family individually, and it was amazing to see.
That's amazing, Kyle. I mean, just incredible work. I mean, you're right. Those families are heroes. Those PT members are heroes as they went through this year and a half. It's something that you don't hear a lot about. Honestly, you don't hear about the work that supported the school organization through
Yeah,
this last year. We had someone on a couple weeks ago. Her name was Ann Henderson, and she wrote this book called Beyond the Bake Sale. And every time I hear
I
that
read
name
it.
of that book, I think about PTAs because, the
Yeah.
traditional PTA, people thought of it as, maybe the bake sale, that once a year
Oh,
thing,
it's
but
so much more. No,
it's not that. And it
it's
has
not that.
evolved.
It's not that.
So
Yeah,
what
PTA
is that
itself
new
is
role?
not that. No, as an organization, as an association, that's why PTA I think is different than another type of parent organization. Our mission is advocacy, and our mission is family engagement,
Mm.
and our mission is support for students. And we've been here a long time, and we've done
Yeah.
some amazing work. From national PTA to every state PTA, we advocate for students and children, and it's not just the bake sale, it's not just the fundraiser. It really, honestly, shouldn't be that a priority whatsoever. It should be educational programs. It should be programs for students with disabilities. It should be programs for families. It should be supporting your educators and teachers. It should be calling your local and your state legislators and your congressmen and women when you're not happy about what's
Mm.
happening. It should be, really advocating for safe school buses and safe water and safe opportunities for students and school aids, so kids can have enough school guidance counselors, and they can have enough mental health service providers, and they can have a school nurse in every building. This is what PTA
Yes.
does. We advocate for kids, and no one does it better.
That's amazing, and I could not agree more. And I'm excited to share that message. So for those of you that didn't know that, maybe you know that now. Some people's experience with the PTA is very limited. Either their parents were, or they paid the membership, but they really weren't involved, and so they don't know
Yeah.
the breadth of what a PTA does. And it's an amazing organization with a outstanding legacy in education. So I do want to talk about fundraising just for a second, because it is
Because it
part of
is important, because that's how actually we pay for programs and services for kids. So probably good to talk about that.
So tell me, it's interesting because I started, the Livingtree Give portion of our platform, and we have two sides of what we do. One is around, engagement in terms of, getting communications out to families, and the other is Give, which is around, really helps schools raise money. And
Yeah.
the whole reason I did it in the first place was I was frustrated as a dad in a PTA with the things that were required of me to do in person. And at that time in my life, that was very difficult for me to do. I was a single dad. I was raising two kids on my own. It was just incredibly difficult time for me, and I really did want to be involved. And they were raising money for a track, and I wanted to do that, but I wanted to give online. I wanted to make it, I wish they would made it easier for me.
Yeah.
And I started looking into, how could we make it easy for parents to give? Um, and what was interesting is, over the last 2 years, digital payments and giving online, I mean, that just seems to be like the new standard for the way that you
Yeah.
do things. So talk to me a little bit about, what is that role? Why is it that PTAs have to do that? How, what is that relationship between the school and the PTA? And what's that secret sauce for those PTAs when it comes to fundraising? Because it is a advocacy organization, but
Mhm.
you need money to
Yeah.
advocate for certain
Yeah,
things
it's
and
a
to provide
balance.
certain
So
things. So
we have a 3-to-1 rule in
okay,
PTA. So if you have one fundraiser, you have to have 3 other programs for students. So
love that.
and what I think PTAs are looking for are really low cost, no cost, easy to administer programs that can bring in the necessary resources they're going to need to run the educational programs for students, to help the school districts with the extras. It's also very important for PTA that you are not supplementing a school district for the things that they should be purchasing themselves, right?
Mm,
So we
yeah,
have a lot of guidance on fundraisers and how we should appropriately support school districts. But PTAs do so much, and so for instance, at my little school pre-COVID, we ran all of our clubs, right? And we had to do that, and the way that we were able to do that was by fundraising the money to run all of our clubs, because our school
yep,
districts didn't have the opportunity to run after school clubs. We were a very small rural school district. We had 340 kids, one K-8 school building. We're so small, we don't even have our own high school. So PTA had to step in and say, okay, we're going to do this extra for the school
hmm
district, but to do that, we have to fundraise. And that's why I think, Livingtree is helpful for school districts and helpful for PTAs, because again, they don't want any upfront costs. Very, very important in
yep.
fundraising. They want something that's very easy. And they want something that is, continues, so they don't have to continue to reinvent the wheel, year after year, because our volunteers change, right? They change every year. So if you can get an established program that just exists and continues, that's the way to go. So fundraising for something, we don't want to raise money to raise money. We want to raise money to support students. So that's really important. And I'm glad that your platform allows us to do that.
Kyle, thank you. I agree.
And I
I
have to
think those
say,
are.
and I know our viewing audience at home doesn't realize. So when Gary and I started talking years ago, I said, "Oh no, change this." And we don't like the way you say that, and you have to do this. And you were so welcoming to our opinions on really having that parent and family voice in your website and in the product. We really appreciated that. Where, as example, something as simple as not every kid has a parent, right? So we should never just
Mm,
say parents. We have to say
that's right.
parents and families. So we were really pleased that you welcomed our feedback and ran with that, and have excited about working together.
Me too, Kyle. Thank you. I think you're only as good as you listen. And that has been a theme that we have been doing. We just have been listening as a company, listening to our customers, listening to the feedback that we get. And I know that's key to, being an executive director too. You listen to your members and what they need, and we are in service. My job is to be in service of you. And maybe that goes back to our original part of this conversation, that just my worldview definitely influences that.
Yeah,
But
I know. I know. I
I,
always
I,
say we have 365 chances each and every year to make a difference in a child's life or in someone's life. And every day you don't make a difference is the day you gave up.
mm,
So I think if we all focus on that, we all figure out how we can make a difference. Every parent has a dream for their children, every single one.
mm,
Not all parents and not all families are able to, provide those same dreams. They don't have the same opportunities. So it's our job as PTA, you as one of our fantastic partners, and our job as community to be the dream makers, right?
yeah.
Every kid has unlimited possibilities. Not all kids start on the same starting line. So that's where we come in.
That's amazing. Fill the gaps, and I love that. Well, Kyle, I think it is one, personally, it's been such an honor, a blessing to get to know you a little
You two
more,
today, who knew
even
we
on
had all of
camera.
this in common? Who knew?
Right. Well, it's funny because you never take the time sometimes to have these kind of
Yeah,
conversations, because you're so busy, and you get into the next thing that we have to do. And relationships matter.
they
It's
do.
great to just sit down and have a conversation with no real agenda, get to know you, get to introduce you to our Livingtree family, and kind of a broader family as on our social channels. So thank you for that. Such an honor and a privilege to be able to do that here. And thank you for your partnership through the New York State PTA. We look forward to continuing working with you throughout the year. So thanks for joining us today.
No, and I appreciate that, Gary. And I know on behalf of our president, Dana Playton, who herself is right now teaching in a kindergarten classroom in Long Island. Her theme is shining a light on every child, and that's what we're going to try to do. And we're glad to do it together.
Thank you. Thanks, Kyle. Talk to you later.
Okay, we'll talk to you later, Gary. It's nice to
Bye
talk.
bye. Same.